very fitting that we are inside this historical barn as we gather together to share the future vision of Cottage Grove. Tonight is a time of celebration. We are here to celebrate each and every one of you, which is the heart and soul of Cottage Grove. A year ago, we began a community visioning project named My Future Cottage Grove. This was our first attempt to try a new way to hear from all of you on what you envision Cottage Grove to be into the future. I can't thank you enough for how receptive you were with this new idea. We asked you to share your thoughts, your concerns, your hopes, your dreams, and your vision for Cottage Grove. I was so impressed with how many of you took the time to share. In fact, over the course of the project, we received 3,729 comments. That's pretty amazing. I think all of you need to give a round of applause for yourself for helping that happen. And what was even better is that the comments we received reflect the diversity of this community. We received input from those with different ages, genders, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. We heard from people that have lived here for many years to those who just moved here. Gathering the perspective of such a diverse group will help ensure that we will meet the needs of everyone in our community. Cities are constantly changing and evolving. Cottage Grove is no exception. Cottage Grove is not the same place it was today, 20 years ago, and frankly, 20 years from now, it's going to look different than it does today. That's why, as we grow and change, we need to know what our citizens want and what they think is the most important. Each of you have different ideas, different wishes, different needs, but as a whole, we think we can all agree that we want what's best for this great city that we live in. Planning for the future is never easy. We have no crystal ball. That's why community engagement is so important to all of us. With a shared vision, we can build our future together. Before I hand over to Charlene Stevens, our city administrator, the microphone, I want to acknowledge some members of this community who served as the My Future Cottage Grove Steering Committee. Over the past year, these folks attended multiple meetings and workshops, volunteered their time and talents to help make sure that this was a very successful community visioning process. I know not all of them were able to be here tonight, but I do want to thank them. So when I call your name, please stand and remain standing, and we will give you a round of applause at the end. So Regina Boston, Jess Davison, Susan Elliott, Bart Fisher, Eric Holton, we're still going here, Melissa Jugbauer, Joe Kovarik, I think it's Michelle Levador, okay, Lisa Maxwell, Jennifer Neardry, Taz Oswald, Eric Riddell, Sandy Scott, Lisa Stidenier, Dan Sullivan, and Jesse Vandas. Now, I didn't see anybody stand, so, oh, do we have one? There he is, I'm sorry. Well, let's give him a round of applause. That's what I get for looking over these glasses here. Thank you again to all those that participated and worked on this committee. In a few minutes, you're going to be hearing from Rebecca Ryan with Next Generation Consulting about the recommendations that resulted from all of your input. In September, the City Council unanimously accepted the findings and recommendations that you're going to learn about tonight. Now comes the fun part, and it really is fun, and the real work. So there is going to be some homework. No, not really, I'm just joking. Well, it could be for some of you maybe, we'll see. But before we get going there, I do want to turn this over to Charlene. So first of all, I want to thank all of you on your commitment to the My Future Cottage Grove project. I want to thank everyone for that provided input into this event. I want to thank everyone who's planning to be involved in this event going forward and all the different options that are going to be presented to you this evening. And I would just ask you to continue to be engaged because you do make our city stronger when you are engaged. And together, we will make Cottage Grove even better in the future. Now, please welcome Charlene Stevens, our city administrator.
I want to echo a lot of the mayor's remarks. I'm Charlene Stevens. I'm the Cottage Grove City Administrator. And again, I'm like the mayor, I'm really pleased to see the number of people that came out and the response to My Future Cottage Grove. 2 years ago, the City Council identified engaging the community and forming the vision as one of its strategic goals. This project ties into that goal. It allowed us to hear from a wide range of residents, to hear what they want, to hear what you want in this community and what you want this community to look like in the future. My husband and I, along with our 3 boys, we moved to Cottage Grove 2 years ago when I accepted the city administrator position, and we love this community. Our boys go to school here, we use the parks and the trails here. We've invested in the community just like you. Many of the city staff that you see here this evening also live in Cottage Grove or grew up in Cottage Grove or have other connections to the community. They too are invested in the community. All of us that are working for the city are committed to making Cottage Grove a great place to live, work, and play, but not only for today, but into the future. That's why My Future Cottage Grove is so important. A city that plans for its future has a roadmap for where they want to go and how to get there. There's kind of a line in Alice in Wonderland where Alice asks the rabbit, you know, which road should I take? And the rabbit says, where do you want to go? Alice says, I don't know. And he said, then it doesn't really matter. And so, you know, if you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't really matter what road you're on. And so communities that are successful are communities that plan for their future and decide what road they want to be on and plan to get there. So that is why My Future Cottage Grove is so important. What we've learned from the results and the recommendation are what we're going to use to build that roadmap and decide where we're going to go. The recommendations are here to guide us as we plan the next 10, 20 years into the future. Change is inevitable, so you want to make it, let's make sure we plan for changes to Cottage Grove remains a place that you still want to live, raise a family, play, and do your business. Tonight you're going to hear from Rebecca Ryan, who helped facilitate this whole process. There are 7 recommendations that came out of the project. To turn these recommendations into initiatives, we have to have your help. We really want these to be driven by you, the community. Tonight, before you leave, you're going to have a chance to express your interest in volunteering by filling out one of the forms that you'll find on your tables, or signing up with an email, and we'll send you an electronic link and you can sign up that way as well. Staff are going to reach out to you after this, to everyone who's expressed an interest, so that we can facilitate how we're going to move this project and these plans forward. It really is important that you decide to engage in the plans, because otherwise they really are just plans, and plans can sit on the shelf if people don't want to implement those plans. And so we're hoping that you're going to help us implement these plans. Remember, as the mayor said, by being engaged, you help make Cottage Grove a stronger community. You can help shape Cottage Grove's future. Without your help, the plans are just going to sit there. So success really depends on your investing time and energies in our community. And so now, kind of what we've been waiting for is Rebecca Ryan, who's going to take us through the results, the recommendations of My Future Cottage Grove. Rebecca is the author of multiple books on strategic planning and local government, and is the founder and owner of Next Generation Consulting. She's been described as a human spark plug, and you will find out why in just a few minutes. So let's give Rebecca a warm welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi. It's wonderful to see all of you and the age ranges we have here tonight. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to pin anybody down, but we have some very young people here, and we have some people who really remember what it was like to be young. So it's wonderful to have all of you here tonight. My talk for you tonight is really in 3 acts. Act 1 is a brief picture of the future that's happening now. Act 2 is understanding the big forces of change and how Cottage Grove is right in the middle of all of those. And I want to talk with you a little bit about those things because I think they help give us context. And they're going to drive at the 7 recommendations that I want to share with you, put some context around, and hopefully elicit your help in moving these forward in the future. And then I want to finally share a closing story that it's one of the most inspiring things I've seen in my 20 years of doing this work. And I think it'll be a nice send-off for us. So I know you're filled with beans and cupcakes, and that sounds like an explosive combination. So let's have some fun. Okay, Act 1, a brief picture of the future happening now. I'm a professional futurist, and I know some of you are like, that's not even a thing. Does she have a crystal ball in her backpack? Like, what's this all about? But it's a little known fact, but between President Roosevelt and President Carter, we had futurists working in every part of the White House, every part of the administration. And after the Carter administration, that just didn't happen as much anymore. So it's very rare to be a working futurist. Most of my mentors are retiring or have retired. And there's a big gap between those folks and me. But the folks where futurists, or the places where futurists are still working are the military and oil and gas, those industries. So when I meet with other futurists, that's who I tend to hang out with. And at one of these meetings, I saw several glimpses of the future. Glimpse number one, it's actually been invented right here in the Twin Cities. You know how when you call, you know, a helpline or a call center, and you get that recording that says what? Your call may be monitored, right? Keep going.
For customer satisfaction.
Right. Wow, did you record this thing? Yes, your call may be monitored for sometimes training, for customer satisfaction surveys. Well, there is a healthcare company in the Twin Cities Metroplex, headquartered here in the Twin Cities Metroplex, that has invented a technology that can listen to your voice, and can note if your voice is starting to show signs of Parkinson's disease. So, but here's how you'll know if it's your healthcare organization. When the recording comes on and says your recording may be monitored, it stops right there. Your recording may be monitored. It doesn't say for training purposes, it's just that your call may be monitored. So if they can perceive that your voice is showing these early indicators of Parkinson's disease, they'll drop a note in your healthcare record so that the next time you see your general practitioner, she or he might check you for this. Isn't that amazing? That's the future. Here's another look at the future. I was out in Silicon Valley where all the nerds play, right? All the, Facebook and, Instagram and all the social media starts. And I met an American-born Nigerian man. He's 27 years old, and he has started a company that is one of the most interesting things I've seen in a long, long time. All of us are filled with neurons, lots and lots and lots of neurons. We have them in our skin, we have them in our eyes, we have them in our nose, and all of our neurons, little science history lesson, or little science lesson, all of our neurons are programmed to do different things. And some species neurons do things really, really well. And what this scientist has figured out how to do is how to take a neuron and reprogram it. Basically erase a neuron and reprogram it with a very specific task, and then put that task, sell that task to a customer. So you may be going through an airport in the near future that has a wall that includes these neurons that are programmed with a really heightened sense of smell. Do you know which animal has the best sense of smell? I didn't know until he told me.
The mole.
It's a mouse. Close. It's a mouse. A mouse has an insanely high sense of smell. So the neurons in this wall at the airport are programmed with mice' sense of smell to detect what, do you think?
Drugs.
Drugs and bombs. Yeah. So again, the future happening now. Third dispatch from the future. Some of you may have seen recently that Mark Zuckerberg, who's the CEO of Facebook, he came out and said, you know what? It turns out Facebook was spreading false news during the presidential election, because there's this whole investigation that's going on. But here's what else was in some of the research that Facebook did. Facebook created a few bots. These are just robots. They're computers, basically, that sift through all the Facebook information, and the more they sift, the smarter they get. These bots, it's called machine learning, right? And it's how bots in the medical field can help diagnose what your problem may be, because the more information you feed these, these computers, these machines, they do this computational learning, or this machine learning. So check this out. Facebook unleashed these bots to go through all of these Facebook archives to try to determine if Facebook had been used by the Russians to proliferate false news, if there were fake Facebook aliases being set up. And as the bots were amassing all of this information about the use of Facebook prior to the election, right, and getting smarter and smarter, the bots found each other. And they started to create a language among themselves, among two of them, that the Facebook engineers could not understand. And so they dove for the power switch to turn these two bots off. Now, to me, right, that's like, wow, when bots start talking to each other and creating a whole new language, like, whoa, that kind of makes my mind melt in a way. But the reason I share these three examples, right, the wall that can be programmed, neurons can be programmed for a sense of smell, right, the bots, and also the example of a computer that can determine whether you have voice characteristics that are early indicators of Parkinson's. These are the economies. These are the businesses. These are the jobs that our kids and their kids will be training in. So Act 1, the future is already here. Act 2, right, the second act of this short discussion tonight is about this place. You know, Cottage Grove. Some of you, we found out in our research, have been here for 3, 4, 5 generations. I love that Mayor Bailey talked about being in this historic barn, because when I think about the waves of change that have impacted this community, right? Let's talk first about what it meant to be a farm family, because the agricultural revolution in this country was our first big revolution. Our second big revolution was what? Industrial revolution, that's right. And now we're in the third revolution, which is digital technology, that's right, exactly. And this is a community that is living in the midst of all of those revolutions. So let's just talk a little bit about the ag revolution, what that was like. How many of you were raised in farm families? Anybody here raised in a farm? Okay. Farm families, are they usually bigger or smaller than today's families? Bigger, that's right. And, you know, if you really think back, now this is probably going back to like Little House on the Prairie era, but tell me about what the education system was like in an agricultural community. What was it like? How many teachers? How many rooms?
One room.
Yeah, that's it. One room schoolhouse with one teacher and kids teaching each other, the third graders helping the second graders and the second helping the first, right? And in that agricultural, you know, sort of supply chain, tell me about contracts. Were contracts needed?
No, with a handshake.
You did it with a handshake because you knew the person that you were dealing with, right? Okay, so just those three beats of what that's like to be in that agricultural era. And now fast forward to the industrial era, right? When you think about, is that better, Sharon? Yeah. She's my communications. She is the communications manager. Thank you, Sharon. Now when you think about the industrial revolution, what's the family type?
Nuclear.
It's a nuclear family. It's a smaller family, one that can be mobile, that can go to where the jobs are. And when you think about in the industrial era, when we're trying to do economic development, we're trying to attract what? Big employers who are going to bring 200 jobs, 400 jobs. My dad worked for a company that employed 2,500 people, right? And what's school like? How many teachers? Hundreds, right? Now, if you're in the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade, you go to one teacher for social studies, one for history, one for math, one for reading, and so forth. And during the industrial era also, we had mass communication, right? Mass mailings, mass newspapers, mass magazines. Now, you think about that industrial revolution. Now think about how that transfers to a digital era. What are family configurations like in a digital era? there is a machine right now that is like, oh, yes! Right. In the digital era, some families don't even live in the same cities. Maybe some of you know those families where one spouse has a job in one city and one has a job in another city. Or people aren't getting married. New York right now has more people living alone than living together, married, right? So people are staying single for longer. The average age of a first marriage in Minnesota is 29 for men and 27 for women. So people are waiting to get married. Tell me about what education is like in a digital era. What is the truth about school now? Some people would say Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, a lot of these entrepreneurs, did they stay in school or did they drop out? They left. They left school. They said, hey, if we can do our schooling online, why do we need to go to an actual place, right? And then you think about how, the role of contracts, the role of trust. Boy, we have to have contracts 15 pages long now, because increasingly the people we're doing business with, we never see. I mean, how many times have you wished that when you called someplace for customer service, you actually got a person or somebody who gave service? Right? So these waves of change from the agricultural era to the industrial era to the technological era, these create changes in values, changes in family size, changes in how we think about education and how we think about what our kids are going to need for the future. And when I think about Cottage Grove, we can see all of those changes playing out in this community. We heard from farm families who said, man, we moved to this area intentionally to have land, and now the city is coming to us, right? So they're living in the midst of this growing industrialization, growing digitization of the economy. We heard from other people who said, hey, I'm a member of the digital economy, and I don't understand why. What's happening is this place is getting heated up right now. So that's just a very active heater. All you're hearing is a heater saying, I want to love you and keep you warm. So we thank you, heater. We thank you. And then we have new residents who work in a digital economy who are saying, hey, how come we don't have bus rapid transit going back and forth to the Twin Cities? They have completely different expectations about even owning a car, right? And so we see, from my perspective, I see this region, your community, as being thrust in the center of all of those changes, the agricultural change, the industrial change, and now the digital change, right? So as we think about how do we shape this community for the future, it makes absolute sense to do what Charlene talked about, right? To look to the future, to say, where do we want to be? And to ask our residents, what matters most to you? So the recommendations, and you all have a little card on your table that has a giant hand with a yes, and on the back are 7 recommendations. And I want to walk you through these 7 recommendations, give you a little more context around them, and I hope that one of these will speak to you. One of these will be juicy, and you'll say, I'm kind of interested in seeing where this goes, and you'll let us have your name, your email, and kind of put your hand up in the air for this. So I want to start with these, I want to explain these 7 recommendations, and as I do this, I'm going to invite you to think about something. Even though I'm a futurist, I'm not like a person who loves flying cars. There are no flying car recommendations that came out of my future Cottage Grove, right? These recommendations were a combination of 2 things. One is your wishes for the future, right? You took online surveys, you participated at town hall meetings, you came to Facebook Live events online, right? So some of these recommendations come right out of what you said. But then what we also did is we looked at trends and we said, what are the things that we know this community is going to have to deal with in the future? These things are coming, ready or not. And so some of these recommendations, you're going to see whispers of the future. You're going to see how these are things that aren't just what residents want, but these are really also very responsive to trends that we know are going to happen. So I'm going to go through each of the boxes very briefly on the back of this card. The first box is to establish a community center task force, right? I can't say how important I think this is for you, and you guys know it too, because it came out time and time again that this is something that most people in the community really want. You know what the key question is? To have a pool or not to have a pool? That is the key question, right? The community is kind of split on whether we should have a pool or whether we shouldn't have a pool. So what we want to do is put together a task force of people who are going to really look at, okay, what are the expenses if we do have a pool? What are the expenses if we don't have a pool? And what's going to best serve the community now and in the future? Now, a quick caveat. How many of you lived in Cottage Grove the last time the community center came up for a referendum? Anybody? Yep. And as you know, we said, no way, Hoser. We are not going to, give any money for this community center. So, but now we have a bunch of new data showing that this is the #1 thing that folks are looking for. Okay, so that's #1. #2. Launch a food and fun festival to intentionally celebrate the community's diversity and next generation. You know where this community came from? Your high school and middle school students. There are over a dozen languages spoken in the homes of your high school and middle school students. And some of those kids say, I feel invisible here. I don't know that this community really is a place for me. And so they're not griping about it though. They're saying, let's have a cultural celebration. Let's bring all of our diversity out for everybody to be able to see. And one of the things that we know about great communities is if you have food, people come, right? So how can we celebrate our culture, celebrate the food of our culture, so that all of the people who might not be mainstream Caucasians see that there are other people like them here and that we welcome them. Okay, so that's #2. #3, Settlers Island, right? I have to say that I've been doing this for 21 years, and very rarely does a community have an opportunity like this one to do something new on a waterfront area. 80% of all people want to spend time at the water, right? So you've got this river, you've got this beautiful island, this park that can be programmed. I mean, it's not a ton of space, but it's enough space that it can be a real jewel, not just for people who live here. I mean, we want it to be for you, but boy, it could help bring people in from St. Paul, from other areas around the state, and that turns into economic development dollars because those people want to buy beer at your taverns, and they want to spend money at your shops. So the Settlers Island is one of our key recommendations for the future. #4, a housing plan that really reflects who we are and who we're becoming. We know that, for example, housing means different things to different people. For people who are ready to give up their single family homes because they don't want to mow the lawn, it's too much house to keep up, they're interested in giving that up, but they don't know what's the alternative. If you're a senior citizen, what's the alternative? If you're a young professional, for young people today, we did a nationwide survey a couple of years ago, and young people said, I would rather have my time on my weekend than do my lawn on the weekend. So it's not just our senior citizens who are looking for smaller yards, less maintenance in their homes and yards. It's also young professionals. So what are we building for them? And then finally, this notion of, when I talked about this third wave of these digital workers, if they are getting married at 29 and 27, average ages in Minnesota for first marriages, between the ages of leaving school and getting married, there's a lot of room for mobility in there, right? So can we have places that aren't single family homes, maybe high-level rental units, really aesthetically pleasing, that maybe have a smaller footprint but have really nice finishes and nice appliances and so forth? Where's the opportunity for them? So that the fourth recommendation is really around getting more diverse in how we think about our housing mix. #5, you have amazing parks, and you have a very active community. I mean, just every time I drive out here for an evening meeting, I'm always surprised by how many people are out and about, right? How many people are out and about. Now what we have to do is really connect those places very intentionally and make it safe. We want our bicyclists, we want our pedestrians to feel like they belong out and about as well. That we're not just a completely car-centric, we're going to run you over if you're not on a car, right? But in a car, but that you belong here, that we're safe, we're connected, and we want you to have access to your public parks. I really feel like in this community, what you have for your park assets is going to be one of your long-term stories about what makes this community great, because you've really taken care of your parks and your green spaces. #6, I have to admit, I'm nerding out about this one a little bit. For a community your size, I have never seen as much digital engagement, online surveys, Facebook, social media as I saw here. I mean, for your community's size, it was off the hook, which means really good, right? It was just amazing. So when we think about the future of democracy, right, the future of citizen engagement, we know that it's going to continue to go online. I mean, right now, there is a political party in Australia called Flux. And check this out. This political party doesn't have a platform in the way that you and I think about political platforms. Like, we know that the Republicans in America have a platform, the Democrats have a platform. In Australia, this party called Flux doesn't have a stand on issues. The only thing they care about is this. They've developed an app. They've developed an app, and they say if you belong to the Flux party, if you're the representative, and we've got several of them here tonight, if you are a member of the Flux party, you're committed to using this app to solicit all of your constituents' votes on the key votes every week before a city council election, or, you know, regularly. So the idea is, how do we use technology to make sure that our representatives are voting in a way that absolutely reflects us? Now, that's an amazing experiment that's being run in Australia right now. That it's not a party, it's an app, right? But Flux is running candidates in major elections. So when you start to think about the future of technology and how that can help our elected representatives, much like this process did, really put their thumb on the pulse of what residents care about, we see this community as being like an early adopter of some of these things, just because of the amazing results we've seen already through My Future Cottage Grove. And then the final thing here is engage residents to attract and launch retail restaurants. This is for every person who said, why don't we have a Buffalo Wild Wings here? I want you to know we heard you. We heard you. And we know that you want to shop here. And we know that you want to get your drink on here. And we know you want to go to dinner here. And you want more opportunities to do all of those things. But the truth is this. If you're on the other side of the desk, if I'm the person at Buffalo Wild Wings trying to decide if we put a new site in Cottage Grove or not, the thing that speaks loudest to me, number one, is data. Like, how many people live in this area? Because usually once we tip about 50,000 people, we start to get much more attractive to some of those large chains. But the other thing is this. You know, Charlene's staff can call Buffalo Wild Wings every month. But if all of a sudden residents start to petition, that means something totally different. That means that takes it to a whole different level. So in this recommendation, we've got a series of sub-recommendations of things that we as residents can do to get more retail in this community so that we can shop here. So that's the final recommendation. So I'm actually going to call the question right now. And I'm going to give you a heads up, Justin, because I want you to pan this audience. Some of you have been reaching for pens as I've been running through these recommendations. Some of you have maybe been thinking about what you would be interested in, right? And now, because this will be very highly visual, if there's something that you're interested in, I want you to just put your yes facing me so that Justin can catch it on a pan. So on the count of 3, if there's something you're going to help with, let's see it! Get those yeses, Justin. Here's the pan. Awesome. So while you guys fill these out, thank you very much. While you guys fill these out, and if you don't want to make your commitment tonight, and you want the city to email you the options through your email, just put your name and email down and they'll send you a link tomorrow or the next day. These are 7 places to plug in for the future. And as you're filling those out, I want to tell you a really quick story. I was working in a region in Indiana. Yeah, I'll just tell you where it is. I was trying to think, like, should I say or shouldn't I say? But it's an interesting story. I was working in Lafayette, Indiana. Lafayette and West Lafayette, Indiana. Anybody a Boilermaker in here? Would you even admit it if you were? Okay, good. Well, because you're in like Big Ten country, right? So these Gopher fans might not be all about that. But so West Lafayette is the home of Purdue, and Lafayette is a really working class community. Subaru is there, lots of blue collar jobs. And so these two communities, there's a fair amount of tension, right? Because the people in Lafayette look at Purdue and West Lafayette and they say, what a bunch of highbrow such and such. So they think they're so special because a lot of the money is on that side. The professors live there. All the students are up in that area, right? And in Lafayette, they say we're hardworking, we're blue collar, right? So you can see the tension, can't you, between the second and third wave right there, in that community right there. And then there's some markers, some roads that really separate the communities. Some of you have lived in communities that are like this. Some of you feel like that might be your truth right now. And as I was doing a process very similar to this one, in that entire community where West Lafayette and Lafayette were supposed to see the same future together. I mean, this is like having a bag of cats, and trying to get these cats to settle down with each other. As we were trying to work on this project together, it was a challenge. And there was one person who kept showing up, meeting after meeting after meeting. Her name was Betty. And she very soft-spoken. She hardly spoke at the meetings. And at one point, I turned to my colleague, Mike. He worked at Purdue, and he was really one of the big champions of this program, really helping bring the communities together to see the future. And at one point, after running into Betty at like 4 or 5 of these meetings, I finally said to Mike, what is Betty's story? Like, she just keeps showing up. He said, oh, Betty. He said, you know what she did? I said, no, that is why I am asking, Mike. He said, in the 1980s, we had a train car that ran right through the middle of Lafayette and West Lafayette. I don't know how long ago you lived there, but there was a train track that ran right through the center of the community. And Betty led an effort that took 20 years to move that train track so that the community wouldn't be as divided and we could start to grow together rather than stay separated and apart. And he said, so Betty knows what hard work is, and Betty knows what it takes to move forward 20 years at a time. And at the end of that project, Mike gave me one of the stakes that had been in that train track. And I think about Betty every time I come and do a program like this, because we're living in a society that loves a quick fix. We're living in a society that expects no more than 2 minutes between when we place our Burger King order at the window and when we pick it up. We're living in a society where everything is trying to go faster. But if we want a community that grows forward together, it is sometimes the hard work of moving tracks, nail by nail, and keeping that vision. My Future Cottage Grove starts tonight. This is a 20-year plan so that our kids get these 7 things that are so important to the future of this community, and many more things as well. Moving the train starts tonight. And I want to thank you in advance for your participation. That's it for my program.